Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 3, from Symbolism of the 3 Degrees by Oliver Daystreet, Part 2, The Fellow Craft Degree, The Winding Stairs. In the winding stairs, an architectural feature of Solomon's temple is seized upon to symbolize the journey of life. It is not a placid stream down which one may lazily float. It is not even a straight or level pathway along which one may travel with a minimum of exertion. It is a devious and tortuous way, requiring labor and effort for its accomplishments. This is appropriately symbolized by a winding stairway. It teaches us that our lives should be neither downward nor on a dead level, but although difficult, progressive and upward. Science of numbers. The winding stairs consist of 3, 5, and 7 steps, numbers which among the ancients were deemed of a mysterious nature. This introduces us to what is one of the most curious bodies of learning of the ancient world, what is known as their science of numbers, many fragments of which are scattered throughout Masonry. It is exceedingly difficult for the modern mind to get any grasp whatever upon what is meant by this so-called science. So highly speculative was it. It does not allude, as its name might seem to indicate, to any of the mathematical sciences or anything akin to them. It was a system of moral science or philosophy wherein numbers were given symbolical meaning and the letters of the alphabet were given numerical values. Whence words were supposed to have certain occult significations according to the sums or multiples of the numerical equivalents of its letters. The elaboration of this idea was productive of what is known as the Hebrew Kabbalah. Pythagoras is reputed to have introduced this school among the Greeks, and according to Aristotle, he taught that number is the principle of all things, and that the organization of the universe is an harmonic system of numerical ratios. To illustrate, the soul was made to correspond to the number 6, and 7 was the counterpart of reason and health. The numbers 3, 5, and 7 had many meanings among the Jews which are not elucidated in the Lodge. The preservation in our ritual of hints of this learning of a past age is now chiefly valuable to us as a proof of the antiquity of Masonic symbolism. There is another interesting feature of the total number of steps of the winding stairs, 15 in all. This was an important symbol among the Jews because it was the sum of the numerical equivalents of the Hebrew letters composing the word Jah, one of the names of deity. It will also be noted that the number of each series of steps, 3, 5, and 7, as well as the total number of steps, 15, is odd. As we have seen, odd numbers were by then ancients regarded with greater veneration than were even numbers. Vitruvius, the great Roman architect who flourished just before Christ, states that the ancient temples were always approached by an odd number of steps. The reason, he says, was that commencing with the right foot at the bottom, the worshipper would find the same foot in advance when he entered the temple, and that this was considered a favorable omen. The thoughtful Mason cannot fail to be struck with the coincidence here indicated. The 3 steps. Adopting the method of these ancient worthies, but varying the meaning, we make the number 3 allude to the organization of our society with its 3 degrees and its 3 principal offices. Among the earliest realizations of every man is that no man lives to himself alone, that he is dependent upon his fellow creatures and they upon him, that he owes them and they owe him mutual aid, support and protection, that to secure these advantages, some must rule and some must at least temporarily obey, that there must be classes and that progress from one class to another must depend upon proficiency in the former. This state of mutual obligation and mutual dependence of men upon one another we call society. The 3 steps, alluding to the 3 degrees and the division of our society into those who govern and those who obey, leads to the ideas of organization and subordination in the Lodge. We have seen that the Lodge symbolizes the world, so its organization symbolizes that of the world into society and governments. Dr. Mackey says that the reference to the organization of the Masonic institution is intended to remind the aspirant of the union of men into society and the development of the social state out of the state of nature. He is thus reminded in the very outset of his journey of the blessings which arise from civilization and of the fruits of virtue and the knowledge which are derived from that condition. In the allusion to the affairs of the Lodge and the degrees of Masonry as explanatory of the organization of our own society, we clothe in symbolic language, says Dr. Mackey, the history of the organization of society in general. This feature is brought out prominently in many monitors. The officers of the lodge. It is said that the master and wardens bear a solar symbolism, but this is too abstruse and too lengthy for us to enter upon here. We are more interested in a very practical symbolism borne by them. If we remember that the lodge typifies human society organized into government, then it becomes at once apparent that the officers of the lodge chosen for fixed periods symbolize the officers chosen for the time being to administer the affairs of the state, the lessons and admonitions of obedience to the officers of the lodge given to its members, and the injunctions of moderation, fairness, and justice towards the members of the lodge laid upon the officers at their installation typify most strikingly the relative duties which the citizens and the officers of the state owe to each other. With this symbolism in mind, make a new study of those portions of our ritual dealing with and defining the mutual attitudes of the officers and members of the lodge toward each other, and these parts of our ritual will take on new meanings. This feature is brought out strongly in the past master's degree as given in the chapter. The five senses. No representation of the pathway to knowledge would of course be complete without some allusion to the means by which it is to be acquired. Thus are the allusions to the five senses to be understood. A moment's reflection will prove to us that through them we gain all our knowledge, and that without them we could learn nothing. What wonderful and noble faculties, and yet how seldom even thought of by us, and how little appreciated and understood. What a truly marvelous organ is the eye, which can without contact make us sensible of the presence, the form, and the color of objects at a distance, and through which we obtain our knowledge and appreciation of all that is beautiful in nature. The senses of hearing and feeling are scarcely less wonderful and are equally important. A little reflection will also furnish us with additional reasons to those given in the lodge why hearing, seeing, and feeling are most revered by Masons. These are in every way the most important. Consider for a moment the relatively small part of our knowledge that comes through tasting and smelling, and how utterly useless these two senses were to our ancient brethren in their operative labors. Then consider again how helpless a human creature would be who possessed neither hearing, seeing, nor feeling. Helen Keller is rightly considered a marvel, yet she is bereft of only two of these, hearing and seeing, deprive her of her finely attenuated sense of feeling, and it would have been impossible for her to have made any progress whatever in knowledge. Commenting on this part of the ritual, Thomas Smith Webb says, "To sum up the whole of this transcendent measure of God's bounty to man, we shall add that memory, imagination, taste, reasoning, mural perception, and all the active powers of the soul present a vast and boundless field for philosophical disquisition which far exceeds human inquiry. We could have none of these without the five senses, and they are therefore introduced as symbols of intellectual cultivation. But the five senses are only ministers or servants to still more important and more mysterious attributes or powers of the human mind, such as consciousness and subconsciousness, reason, memory, expectation, experience, imagination, taste, psychic feelings, emotions, attention, cognition, conation, desire, perception, judgment, ideation, understanding, belief, etc. To get any adequate conception of the vast field covered by the characteristics and attribute of the human mind, turn to some standard treatise on psychology. Consider imagination. Without it, we could not have looked into the future and seen anything which we had not already experienced. Improvement along any line could have been nothing but fortunate blundering. We could not have consciously gone to work to test the truthfulness of reality of a hypothesis, something we had only imagined or seen in our mind's eye. A wild or uncontrolled imagination we call insanity, but a sane imagination has been the mother of all conscious human progress. Consider the power of reasoning. A disordered reason is insanity, but without reason we could from facts experienced draw no conclusion as to facts not already known. The man who allows his imagination and reasoning processes to run away with his judgment is no less an object of either condemnation or pity than is the man who allows his appetite and passions to overcome him. Yet who would, if he could, chain the human imagination? Who would, if he could, strip us of our natural impulse to draw deductions and conclusions? Misleading as these two attributes of the human mind are when not kept in restraint, They lie at the fountainhead of nearly all our knowledge and of our achievements. The disquisition upon the five senses of human nature which appears in our American monitors may be found in the English monitors also, which preceded the revision of Dr. Hemming in 1813. He eliminated all reference to them, and they are still missing from English work. We feel that in some way Dr. Hemming must surely have failed to catch the meaning of this part of our symbolism. Dr. George Oliver, an eminent and learned English Mason, deplores the omission and says that it ought by all means to be restored. Having thus indicated to the candidate something of the importance and the means of acquiring knowledge, the proper fields of study and investigation are next pointed out. The five orders in architecture. The five steps are said to allude further to the five orders in architecture: the Tuscan, the Doric, the Ionic, the Corinthian, and the Composite. Their origins and their relative merits are pointed out, and we are told something of architecture in general. We would naturally expect something on this subject in a society derived from one of actual builders and architects, and here we have an internal evidence of the great age of Freemasonry. This is a flotsam which has been wafted to us down the stream of time from that remote period when Freemasonry was an organization of operative Masons. To our speculative society, it typifies all the other useful arts and serves to convey to the intelligent mind the truth that architecture, considered as one of the fine arts, is a subject well worthy of our study. It is through architecture that every great people have left the enduring records of their fame or even of their existence. Books perish and decay, but from their buildings which still remain, we know for a certainty of the great nations of antiquity. George Moller, in his charming essay on Gothic architecture, speaks of these architectural remains as documents of stone and declares that they afford to those who can read them the most lively picture of centuries that have lapsed. The seven liberal arts and sciences. Other fields of study are said to consist of the seven liberal arts and sciences and are enumerated as grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. In our fellow crafts charge, we are recommended to study the liberal arts and sciences which tend so effectually to polish and adorn the mind. In England, emulation working, the candidate is informed that he is expected to make the liberal arts and sciences his future study, that he may the better be enabled to discharge his duties as a Mason and estimate the wonderful works of the Almighty. It is, of course, obvious at a glance that these seven subjects enumerated above by no means exhaust the fields of knowledge now open to man, but the time once was when they did. And herein is another incontestable evidence of the great age of Freemasonry and its ceremonies. We cannot do better than quote Enfield. He says that in the 7th century, that is to say 1300 years ago, these seven heads were supposed to include universal knowledge. He who was master of these was thought to have no need of a preceptor to explain any books or to solve any questions which lay within the compass of human reason. Knowledge of the trivium, as grammar, rhetoric, and logic were then denominated, having furnished him with the key to all language, and that of the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, having opened to him the secret laws of nature. Says Dr. Mackey, when few were instructed in the trivium and very few studied the quadrivium, to be master of both was sufficient to complete the character of a philosopher. The term trivium means the three ways or paths, and quadrivium the four ways or paths of knowledge. Hence it is with the greatest propriety that it is said that we are taught in the fellow craft degree to explore the paths of heavenly science. The letter G. This is the initial of our name for deity, and is appropriate enough in lodges employing the English language, but our greatest scholars maintain that the proper and original letter is the letter Yod, which is the initial of the name of deity in the Hebrew language. A volume of abstruse symbolism revolves around this letter, which it is impossible even to enter upon here. The serious Masonic student must read and study it for himself. However, whatever other meanings it may bear, it serves again to remind us of the existence and beneficence of deity, and of his omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. Geometry. Another numerous class of Masonic symbols are geometrical figures: the square, the triangle, the pentalpha, the hexalpha, the circle, etc. We know that some of them have been employed for ages as symbols of moral qualities. Geometry is defined as that branch of pure mathematics that treats of space and its relations. The science of the mutual relations of points, lines, angles, surfaces, and solids, considered as having no properties but those arising from extension and differences of situation, Standard Dictionary. Or, as defined in our Masonic monitors, it is that science which treats of the power and properties of magnitude in general, where length, breadth, and thickness are considered from a point to a line to a superficies, and from a superficies to a solid. It is by this science that we lay off angles, triangles, circles, squares, etc., etc., and are enabled to calculate their dimensions and areas. By it, the surveyor measures land, locates rivers and seas, delineates the boundaries of oceans, and fixes the limits of nations. By it all, architectural plans are devised, and the movements of the heavenly bodies are calculated. It is highly probable that at an early period, every Masonic lodge was a school of architecture, and that the mastery of this subject led to the study of the other liberal arts and sciences, particularly geometry. This accounts for many features of our ritual that are otherwise inexplicable. Preeminence is given by our ritual to the science of geometry. It and its allied branches, trigonometry, architecture, and astronomy, were the only exact sciences known to the ancients, and the perfection to which they had reduced them is even now constantly surprising us. By them all, mathematical calculations were made. Arithmetic and algebra in the modern sense were then unknown. The astonishing results obtained by them from an application of geometrical processes were well calculated to impress the mind. As the only exact science known to them, geometry was the most appropriate emblem of moral perfection in an age when everything had its symbol. We accordingly read in our Masonic monitors that of the 7 liberal arts and sciences, geometry is the most revered by Masons, that it is the foundation of architecture and the root of mathematics, that it is the first and noblest of sciences, that it is the basis on which the superstructure of Masonry is erected, that by it we may curiously trace nature through her various windings to her most concealed recesses, and discover the power, the wisdom, and the goodness of the grand artificer of the universe, that geometry or Masonry, originally synonymous terms, being of a divine and moral nature, is enriched with the most useful knowledge, that while it proves the wonderful properties of nature, it demonstrates the more important truths of morality. It cannot be denied that to the present generation and in our present state of learning, geometry is nothing of the kind. To anyone except a Freemason, and to the great majority of them, the idea that geometry inculcates moral truth is utterly foreign and incomprehensible. Those members of the craft who have ever thought of the matter at all as a rule look upon these expressions as crude extravagances, as distorted attempts to attach a speculative meaning to a science or an art which had never properly borne any other than a practical signification. We are not surprised, it is true, to find still incorporated in our system these inheritances of a past age, and simply tolerate them as such without any serious attempt to ascertain their meaning or to measure their significance. While, as stated, geometry does not at present enjoy any such an enviable distinction among the sciences as that claimed for it in our Masonic ritual, yet the time once was when it was precisely so regarded by the wisest of men on earth. What then is the significance of these ideas of a past age in our Masonic system? It seems to me to afford the strongest internal evidence of the great age of our Masonic ritual and symbolism. The 7 liberal arts and sciences, as enumerated in the Lodge, are not now to be understood literally, but rather as a symbol of what they once were in fact, namely, the entire domain of human knowledge and research. No one man is, of course, expected to cultivate the whole of this vast field, but this part of the ceremony of passing urges upon us the importance and the duty of constantly applying our minds to the attainment of wisdom in some of its forms. We have no right to be idle. It is a sin against God, ourselves, and society. Whatever others may be, Masons have no right to be idlers and loafers. It is our God-given privilege and our solemn duty to work, not because a night is coming when man's work is done, but that we may be able to do better work and more work in that brighter day that all good Masons expect to see when this life has passed away. The wages of a fellow craft. In the middle chamber, we are informed what the wages shall be to the faithful craftsman who has observed the moral and the divine law, and wasted not his time in idleness or vice. We are told that they shall be corn, wine, and oil. Such was literally true to our ancient operative brethren, as our old documents abundantly prove. With us, of course, they are not received in the realistic sense, but emblematically. From a remoteness of time when the memory of man runneth not to the contrary, the spiker or ear of corn has symbolized plenty. Wine has symbolized health, and oil has symbolized peace. The faithful fellow craft is therefore assured that his wages, his reward shall be plenty, not mere sufficiency, but plenitude to supply all his physical, moral, and spiritual wants. Health of body, mind, and soul. Peace in this life, in the hour of death, and in the life to come. While we have by no means exhausted the subject, this, my brethren, is briefly the meaning and purpose of the fellow craft degree, and if you do not already, we are sure that a little study and reflection will lead you to agree that in beauty and purity and loftiness of conception, this degree is worthy to keep company with those splendid degrees of entered apprentice and master mason. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.